Hi, welcome to PDQ Live. Today we have our CEO, Dan Cook, with us today. We're going to talk about some of the communication errors, misunderstandings that occur between IT leadership and executive leadership, and talk about some strategies that we can employ to work through those. Dan, thanks so much for joining us.
It's great to be here. Can't wait.
And we have Josh, of course. He's our IT director.
I am.
So where should we start?
Ooh, let's.
We could start with Package Wednesday.
We should start with Package Wednesday.
We should start with Package Wednesday. Good call.
Yeah.
So we've got Package Wednesday here, and we got some cool stuff coming down the pipe from our very own librarian. Thank you, Chad, who is amazing as always. So let's see what we've got. We've got the latest SQL Server Management Studio version 20 is now available. And we've also done a major update to all our PS Window update packages. If you haven't used those, definitely check them out. Some of the highlights we've got is packages now automatically back up and restore existing with SUS and Windows settings, fix some new Git provider bugs that required running the script twice on new machines, fix the bug where the audit sometimes incorrectly reported no available updates, updated PDQ inventory, PowerShell scanner does not return additional blank entries, better error checking and cleaner output logs, more details on available updates. So definitely, if you've had any of those issues with those packages in the past, definitely check them out.
That's awesome, especially after this last Patch Tuesday.
Yeah.
That's a great timing for those.
Exactly. What was it, like 155 packages, I think, or patches, I should say?
I don't know, a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
Well, and you did your video. Brock has a new video, so if you haven't watched that, check that out too.
The Patch Tuesday?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
live.
that is up there on YouTube.
Alrighty. Well, should we dive in
Let's
to
do it.
these problems between IT leaders and executives
Yes.
in most organizations, and why kind of our take on why that's a problem, and how, if you're struggling with this, some things that you can employ to get around that.
Yeah. So I think let's say problem. Let's say challenges. That sounds
I like
better,
challenges
right?
better.
Yeah.
That sounds better. So step one, they're speaking different languages, right?
Sure.
I think we can all admit a lot of tech people don't particularly like to speak to humans. Yes? Not
sure.
really their favorite thing.
You all do a great job.
Well, that's because Josh is an example of a unicorn.
Oh,
He has a
thank
very
you, I think.
advanced, it's a compliment. He has
Okay.
a very advanced technical skill set.
what's your spirit animal then?
I'm also a unicorn.
Okay.
I'm not as technically advanced as Josh, however.
I see.
I'm more advanced in the social skills.
I see.
And everyone's a little bit different.
Okay.
But a lot of tech people don't want to talk to humans, which in my opinion derails their career if they want to advance up the ladder. So I think we need to teach them some social skills, some soft skills.
Okay.
Because it's hard to communicate with people like you because you're scary. Not
Really?
you. You're not scary. But a lot of executives are. So that's the conundrum.
Okay, so when you say that they're speaking different languages, I think yesterday, Dan, we were talking, and you were talking about a way of the different apertures,
Yeah.
the different parts of the organization are looking at a problem or a different problem set.
Yeah.
So can you kind of give us a overview there of what you meant by that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I am grateful to be here, and so thanks for having me. Great work y'all do. I would say, in my experience, what I've appreciated about our IT team is there is a very much a customer centricity, and the customer being the end user here at PDQ. Our team members have a very high, I think, NPS score, maybe if that's one way to put it, in terms of the quality of service and the work that our IT team does. So from an IT perspective, I think there's a lot of focus on the end user, and there's, of course, a lot of focus on the work that they have to do on any given day. And so the aperture of an IT professional, in my point of view, would be with those lenses, if that's how you say lens, plural, lenses in mind. An executive is going to have perhaps slightly different views. There will definitely be other components to the lens, things like budget. And I think good IT teams, of course, are well-versed in how to think through budgets. So I'm not suggesting that that's not a core capability. They're oftentimes thinking about trade-offs. And, hey, look, we like the recommendation that IT is making on something, but let's make sure that we're thinking about other options and making sure that we're understanding what different opportunities might be in front of us and what the trade-offs might be in those options. And so I think good executives, good leaders will oftentimes approach problems with the lens of what choices should we make and what are the trade-offs of the decisions. I think oftentimes IT comes at it from, hey, here's the best technical answer and here's what the end users want. And it's how do you reconcile those things, I think sometimes can be interesting.
I think you're right. I think the other thing that happens often is IT will come with a recommendation, and they've done on the back end those trade-off calculations. And so when I come to talk to an executive, I've already done this.
Right.
And then I give you and I tell you the thing instead of letting you participate in that discussion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like you said yesterday, the worst thing you can do is say it's impossible, because nothing's like impossible.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I think that's exactly right. I mean, what any exec wants to hear, and I will disclaimer this, PDQ is different than maybe the companies that you all work at and size and stage and complexity. But the worst thing that we like to hear is something's impossible, because everything's possible. It's just what's the trade-off associated with doing the thing? Is it more work, more effort, more money, more resources? But just to be aware of those trade-offs is very helpful for an executive, because then when decisions are made, they're able to make them with confidence.
Sure. Yeah, and the thing you said yesterday is executives should be making those like 51-49 split decisions, not the ones that are like so obvious that you can just make them all the time.
Yes, I think that's right. And I think from an IT perspective, you make that easier for executives when you present them with a few different options. Here's the trade-offs associated with those options. Here's our recommendation. And then an exec doesn't have to overthink it. They can just be like, hey, looks like you've done the work. Looks like we're aware of the different trades. Therefore, let's go with your suggestion. Yep. I think what makes it more difficult is if an answer's put on a plate that says, hey, here's the answer. No other information is shared. And before you know it, the exec's like, well, is there a better way? And do we need to investigate this further? And before you know it, trust starts to erode a little bit there.
Yeah, and I think it kind of gets compounded more when we start talking about like an XY problem, which is one of my favorite things to talk about on the webcast, is this XY problem of we're both trying to solve for a proposed solution instead of solving for the actual problem.
Yep.
And so we get into like the situation you're describing, the stalemate, and we erode trust, which kind of brings us to this next point of a common question is, well, why do executive teams always want to bring in consultants?
Right.
Why is it always better to bring in like an external party? Like, why don't you trust me? And honestly, a lot of times the answer is, well, no.
Yeah.
Because we've been in so many of these head-to-head like conversations where it's like I have to make a decision and we can't collaborate, that, I want to bring in this external party.
Yep.
I have a question for you too, though. This is an honest question. You ready?
Yeah.
I want the honest truth. When he is explaining something to you in these situations, do you feel comfortable telling him you don't understand what the crap he's saying?
Well, Josh would be the better answer of that question, but I would submit to you that he's probably gotten very used to me saying, hey, could you say that again at 0.5x speed and maybe dumb it down as if you're talking to a third grader?
Dan and I have had lots of conversations, and here's the thing that I've realized and I really appreciate is I might know IT, but I know very, very little about operating a business.
Conversely, do you ask him questions? Do you ask him budgeting
I ask Dan,
questions?
I'm sure they're like finance 101 questions. I'm like, hey, can you explain this like on 5? Because it's just like, and I think that's the thing that we as an IT industry fail to realize, that we're subject matter experts on maybe opposite sides of the playing field, but we're trying to achieve the same goal.
Yeah.
And when we get like egos and in the way, it just makes things so much harder.
Yeah.
I think that's a great call out. And, Tara, to your point about we want to help our viewers and, of course, our customers think about their own careers and how they advance. If you're working for leaders, and I'll say this with all humility, because by no means I'm perfect at this, but if you're working for leaders who won't ask the questions and aren't willing to kind of be somewhat humble or ask the follow-ups and come off as maybe being dumb at times, I think that's a problem. If someone walks in the room and pretends like they know everything, that's to me a yellow to red flag that like maybe this is a business that you might not want to work at. Yeah. What I've appreciated about the team here at PDQ is I like to think very collaborative, a lot of questions, low ego. So if I don't know the answer to something and it's technical, Josh will start high level and he'll work his way in, and we'll go in all kinds of directions. But I think that creates a very collaborative environment.
But that's something that I think we do well, and I think that you model well, because if you're asking him questions, he could choose to get defensive.
Right.
And he could choose to dig his heels in and say, this is the only answer, Dan. Stop asking me for other solutions. And then we do have this. Yeah. And then you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah. There's a question in the chat right here. I'll just go ahead and read it. So what are some ways you can gauge technical understanding of leadership so you can work them at their level? Right. And we're talking about this right now. So I'll just give like kind of my experience and my take on this. If someone is not asking you questions that are engaged, then you're talking past them.
Yeah.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And don't be offended if someone asks you a question for understanding, like you're saying, dig in your heels.
Yes.
Like that is someone that's actually trying to engage in this conversation with you to come out with the best outcome possible.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe one tip there too. I think Josh is spot on. A lot of times these conversations happen in group dynamics, and the fact of the matter is nobody wants to look dumb in front of a group. And so I think if you're not getting a lot of questions, it might suggest that there isn't an understanding. And so one way you might follow up after the meeting is to send a note via Slack or Teams or whatever to say, hey, just want to follow up. Is there anything I can answer for you or any clarification you need? And that gives someone a lower risk way to ask the dumb questions.
Yeah.
And I think also shows a spirit of, hey, I'm here to help you and so on and so forth. And by the way, it goes both ways. If after the meeting you hear something where it's like, hey, they're talking high level finance or some strategic thing that you're not aware of, just send a follow-up note and be like, hey, I'd love to understand more, this topic. It'll help me inform my team or the work that I'm doing.
Or watch their body language. If you see that they've stopped listening.
Yeah.
They're now arguing.
It's clear to see, especially on Zoom, it makes it really obvious to tell when somebody's not paying attention to a meeting, right? Because everyone's like, oh, I'll just sneak Slack over here and look at it.
Yep.
You can tell it's as obvious as if I look this way and try and talk to someone.
Yeah, I would also submit, if there's low engagement on a Zoom call, I do think there's problems. And so you need to find ways to a better collaborative environment there, maybe smaller groups.
So if you've tried to have this conversation and they're not meeting you where you're at, they're not teaching you at a level with which you can understand the content.
Yeah.
Do you think as an executive, this might be a reason that you turn to consultants, or are there other things that go into it? Are there budgetary reasons?
Or maybe an external hire, right?
Yeah.
Like you've been in this situation for a while with an IT team.
Right.
And you're talking past each other. The IT team's not serving the business like it should.
Yeah.
Like, do you do consultants, or is it time to start maybe looking external?
Yeah, I think there's a few instances where you might look for kind of third-party help. One would be there's a spike in a project, and it's just clear from a resource and bandwidth perspective, you need a little help. So, hey, let's go find someone. Hopefully that's done collaboratively with the IT team. Let's find a partner that can help you and that can give us the bandwidth we need. I think there are instances where, based on your size and stage and scale that's happening, you might see a lack of capability. You might say, hey, I'm not totally confident that we have a capability to do said thing in IT or candidly in any part of the business. And it might be helpful for us to bring in a third party to help validate that perspective or that opinion. So that's another instance. And I think the last one would be, and this is the worst case scenario I would submit, is where IT and maybe an exec team don't quite see eye to eye on something, and you almost need like a tiebreaker or somebody who might come in and say, hey, like, here's what we think. And we've actually had an instance of having done that. And I wouldn't say it was something that I'd like to repeat, but I think it was early in our relationship as a team. And I think we were trying to get to know each other a little bit. And, in hindsight, we probably could have handled that one better.
I think we could. I think being on the other side of that, my initial reaction to a lot of that is like, well, why do we need an external party? Why do we have to bring in like consultants? Like, this is what I do all day, every day.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, I don't know everything. And looking back, like, that's ego in the way.
Yeah.
That is ego and failure to communicate, just getting in the way.
Yeah, that's a great glass half full way to look at it. I mean, really, if you get third party resources to come and help, it might mean you have a little more bandwidth to do other things, or maybe it's just a little more time you have. I mean, that would be.
And you get to learn something.
Yeah.
Like, if this is something that a consultant is doing all day, every day.
Right.
They may not do it the way that you're going to do it, but you'll pick up something. You will learn something.
If you're open to it.
Yes.
And actually, Dan just said something really interesting that I want to ask you about.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but let's do it. How do you, as an executive, decide if the IT team is performing well and is it time to cut bait without, and I'm actually asking, this is difficult.
Yeah.
You don't know IT the way that they do. How do you gauge that without employing an outside IT consultant? This is like an aha moment for me.
Yeah.
That must be really difficult.
Certainly it's difficult in any part of the business, right? But I think there's a lot of different ways. First of all, we're fortunate here to have a team that's very, as I mentioned, end user friendly and centric. And so when you see really high, or I should say positive feedback about the service that's being provided and the way the employees are treated, I think that's like checkbox number one.
Yeah.
I think the second is, at any given time, there are big initiatives, big lifts that are happening to hopefully make our customers' lives better, the products better, to support the business. And if we're able to achieve those initiatives and objectives and to do it in a way that it seems like people are pleased with the outcomes, I mean, that's like checkbox number two, right? And then I think third, and maybe less important and probably more reliant on finance as a partner, is like, hey, are we doing these things within a budget constraint that like fits and maps to the business's needs, and of course, the what's going on outside. So I think those would be at least 3 frameworks to think about. Is like how does the team feel about the service they're being provided? Are we achieving big initiatives that matter? And are we doing it within a budget framework, among other things? I don't know.
Yeah. One thing I want to dig into a little bit there is, are we achieving the big things that matter? Because this is a lot of times where there's a disconnect across the organization. The big things that matter to IT aren't always the big things that matter to the rest of the business.
Yeah.
And I think this is more a problem that they're not big things, but they're not communicated in the same language.
Yeah.
There's not this, if this, then that. There's no trade-off discussion that happens.
Yeah.
Right? Like every IT person has always had this experience where at some point you're going to have someone in leadership that is, higher on the totem pole than you come up and say, you have to do this. And there's a couple choices. And what I have experienced more often than not is people just say, okay.
Right.
Which does nothing but further the resentment between the two teams.
Yeah.
So how is an effective way to say no, or are you sure? Into that?
Yeah, I mean, so we have the benefit at PDQ of being a software company, and so we work with engineers who build products that hopefully you all love, and they are constantly dealing with trade-offs associated with what feature to build, right? There's no end to the number of features and requests that we could pursue. And so they've had to model a goal-setting framework that allows us to say, hey, here are the priorities we're gonna make this quarter. Here's buy-in from the broader group and from customers. And then here's the things we're going to say no to. So I think that is an interesting framework to maybe apply to IT. And not every business is in software and maybe doesn't have these types of frameworks to lean on. But I'm a big believer, and we joked about, I don't know why the quarter, 3-month period has become kind of the standard. I think it's just long enough to where you can do a lot of stuff in that time period, but it's short enough to where it's actually within kind of line of sight to achieve something. Are you being very deliberate about setting goals on a quarterly basis, getting buy-in from stakeholders, and ensuring that you're budgeting the amount of time that those goals will require? So, for example, do you go into a quarter where there's just going to be a lot going on, and you say, hey, we're going to budget 35 to 50% of our time on these key initiatives. We've talked to stakeholders. We've gotten their buy-in on these things. We've got air cover on them. We've also budgeted 50% of our time for stuff that we just know is going to pop up, the firefighting that inevitably happens. And if you go through that process well at the beginning of a quarter or even before the quarter starts, and if you can get buy-in from the right stakeholders, it makes the no conversations and the trade-off conversations with those so much easier. So let's say midway through the quarter, someone says, hey, we need you to do some new thing, or maybe the IT team wants to do some new thing. There's a conversation around, okay, well, what's the trade-off that has to happen? What bandwidth do we have where we can either use it, and what trade are we making to push something off into a future quarter? Does this make sense?
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Okay, can I ask the question they're all thinking?
Yeah.
Let's just get it over with. Ready? Breathe. Take a breath. Why do executives love to hire consultants, and is there imaginary budget that you pay for it out of? Because this happens all the time. Not here. I'm going to clarify.
Yeah.
Our team's amazing. I've worked for a lot of companies. I didn't know you guys have too, but like you beg for an extra help desk person, like there's no budget. And then a month later, like we brought in an IT consultant to look at your infrastructure and see what you guys are doing wrong.
Yeah.
Is there an imaginary budget?
Well,
Talk us through that, please.
Yeah. I mean, I won't pretend to speak for a lot of other businesses, but and without getting into an accounting lecture, which nobody here wants, and if you do, really, there are every company budgets at any given year, generally by department, and a lot of businesses will set aside additional budget that's maybe more, we'll call it flex, that could be appointed to any particular thing throughout the course of the year. We try to be conservative in the way that we do that because we just don't know what needs might emerge throughout the year. So good businesses that budget well might set aside a little pool for one-off projects that might pop up. There are other kind of accounting shenanigans that can emerge at times where, based on how auditors review financial statements, they might not count one-time consulting costs against your P&L. But again, that's accounting nerd talk, and I guess we are surrounded by nerds, but not of the accounting variety. So we'll move that to the accounting webcast that no one will watch.
These are the questions that I've had, and these are the conversations that I've had with Dan, that I have with Brandon. Like they'll come and talk to me about IT. I ask them about these type of things.
Yeah.
And this is what makes this like an effective thing, because the more I understand about the business, the more that I can kind of figure out and kind of maneuver to get stuff done instead of it being adversarial.
Yeah.
These are the big takeaway that I learned is like, if you can figure out more about how the business itself is ticking, the better IT operator you're going to be.
It's a great point. I do think there's something to be said about to the degree you like to learn and you want to advance your knowledge beyond maybe IT topics, understanding how accounting and finance works just a little bit. First of all, it can help you in your own personal life.
Yeah.
Hashtag budget.
Can you do my taxes? 'Cause it sounds like you're saying you'll do my taxes.
Well, Monday. So we don't have a lot of time.
Perfect,
Tax day's Monday.
Okay.
In case you were. Yeah. But more if you understand how the finance and accounting teams are working, your proposals, the initiatives you're proposing, how you go into budget season, it could really inform those conversations, I think, effectively.
So how can you help our customers, since now you're their mentor? Sorry, Dan's everyone's mentor. How can our IT managers or our sysadmins become involved in picking these outside consultants with their executive team? Is that a conversation they can start having?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, if you go back to kind of goal setting as an idea, and goal setting is really initiative identification is another way. Hey, we've had a big lift in Q2. We've had conversations with the right people. They're bought into that initiative. There's a question then. Well, do we have other initiatives that we need to trade off between? Are there other things that the business needs? And I think to be involved in those conversations to say, hey, there's more demand for our team than there is bandwidth.
Yeah.
And for the IT team to make recommendations, hey, if we really want to take on this project, we know a group that can come in and help us.
Perfect.
There is something really valuable to, I think, any IT team to the degree that you can do this as a group and your business allows you to have a few relationships outside the company that you have trust and faith in. Because I'd much rather, as the CEO, lean on y'all's recommendation than have to go out and hunt for some consultant that I have no freaking clue about. And so to have some relationships like that where you could say, hey, we could spin up somebody to help us with this thing if it's really needed. It doesn't hurt.
That feels so much less confrontational too.
Yes. Well, and also very signal if the exec team is saying, actually, no, we don't trust your consultant, that might be a signal that there's a trust gap too.
Yeah.
And you always want to look for those signals and you want to ensure that trust relationship is there. And those would be some yellow flags, right?
Yeah.
For sure.
Like that has helped me get so many things done that wouldn't otherwise have been done, is being able to look and then ask for help. And taking a step back, like these are the things that I want to accomplish. Right. And I know I don't have budget for it, but I know that I don't know enough about budget and finance to like figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
But if I have that trust relationship, hey, I want to do this. How do I actually effectively get this thing done? Help me figure it out.
Because you're both checking your egos at the door and getting more accomplished for the organization.
Right.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
It's you got to speak the same language and realize that you're both just subject matter experts on two opposite ends of the same spectrum.
I will just add too, and this kind of touches on Marcel's question about outside help. There is like what I've come to appreciate about growing a business like PDQ is that most of the problems we deal with have been solved before. Like there's very few things we're doing, secret, that are like revolutionary that have never been solved. And so the point here is, a lot of times teams, not just IT teams, any team inside a business can become a little insular and say, hey, we've got the answers. And I think there's real wisdom to always wanting to have a little bit of outside learning happening, whether it be through a consultant type engagement or candidly just through relationships at other companies where you can say, hey, what are some of the cool things you guys are doing? Or what are some of the advancements you're seeing in technology? And so I think infusing best practices and new ideas into your team is critical because if you don't do that, inevitably, exec teams at some point will turn their eye to every team and say, hey, what are you doing that's new? What's the innovation that's happening?
Yeah.
And so I do think there's some wisdom there.
I know we have questions, but I just want to ask Dan one more question that I think you touched on in our meetings ramping up to this. And I think it's something that you model very well at our company because we're a tech company. We're filled with nerds, right?
Speak for yourself, but yes.
No, you're not a nerd. How do you adjust training for more introverted type people? How can you provide soft skill trainings for people that maybe want to learn how to handle conflict better, how to gain these skills? What advice would you give?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't know if I deserve the compliment I guess you gave me, which maybe you have to because I'm your guest here, but. I think one of the thoughts we talked about, and maybe this is where you're taking me, is this idea of, well, first of all, I would say be authentic to yourself. I think one of the worst things you can try and do is pretend to be someone you're not. And you were hired for a reason, hopefully. The skills you bring to the table, the technical knowledge you have, you should have real confidence in. I think we should always be striving to learn and develop, and everyone in their own lives and on any given team knows what path that might be that they need to take. And for some people, it might be developing better personal skills. If you are not on help desk, it might help sometimes to rotate through and actually engage with a customer or an end user and remember what it's like to talk to and serve somebody, even if at times that can be very obnoxious. It's probably something that I should do more often is just get in the seat and have the empathy that comes with having those experiences.
You were up there with Jensen not that long ago.
I was, and I every time I learned something new. So that might be a different direction than you were trying to take me. We didn't talk about comparative advantage. Is that what you were?
The comparative and the absolute advantage with Josh specifically. I really love what you said there.
Yeah. Well,
let's talk about Josh.
So I studied economics in college. Not that any of you care. We talked about accounting. Now we're talking about economics.
I do.
Yay. There's this principle in economics called absolute and comparative advantages. And I think this principle is really important on any team that you might be on. So I'll give you an example. You're hired because you have some real technical expertise. You sit on a team of other IT professionals and you start to really quickly identify what other people are really good at. And that can be both very humbling if you have the right mindset. It can touch your ego if you have the wrong mindset. But the main point is to be very reflective about the strengths and weaknesses about the people that are around you and on their team. And what I've come to appreciate is that you might, as an IT professional, land on a team where you're the most social relatively to the other members of your team. They might be the most introverted people ever, and all of a sudden you might emerge as the people person, as the people leader, as the person that needs to interface with other teams. You might take that same person, drop them on another team, and you might become the most introverted person, and you might be surrounded by extroverted people. The main call out here is be very aware of your contextual environment, of your relative strengths and weaknesses, and lean into the opportunities in front of you where your relative strength can benefit the team in some way, whether that being the most technical person or whether that being the most people person or somewhere in between. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that kind of touches on your question specifically, but I think as an IT pro, you should always be saying relatively, what are my strengths and where can I really benefit the team? And guess what? Career growth happens with that mindset.
Yeah. You're not comparing yourself to all the extroverts in the company. You're 100%. Comparing yourself to other IT professionals.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And it might not be your time. If you're an introverted person and you're surrounded by, Josh, I wouldn't say is like, you're not like most extrovert person I've ever met, but he's a very good communicator, clearly. That's why we have him here, and he does an amazing job. And so I love having him here because he can be that bridge between these technical topics and IT topics and the executive team. Maybe Josh gets dropped at some other business and he's the best technical expert to solve a problem, and there's someone else who emerges as the person to...
I feel bad for that business. If I'm the technical expert, we're in trouble.
Okay, well, that makes me worried.
Okay, Jake, we probably have a lot of questions, do we, Brock? Should we do questions?
Yeah, we've got a few.
And you got swag to give away.
I do have some swag, so get ready.
Hey.
Ready? Yeah, we are ready. All right. How do you get your boss to take a vacation? Our very own Rachel Coleman.
Rachel.
I don't think Rachel qualifies for the swag.
No.
I'm going to go disable Rachel's accounts right now.
Right now. She's done.
All right, next.
Super easy. All right. Now that you've got Detect, what is the next acquisition target?
Marcel coming in hot. In case you didn't know, we just announced, I guess it was Tuesday? What day is the day? Thursday, that we launched a product called PDQ Detect. Check out the website. Next week on the webcast, if I remember right, we'll be featuring PDQ Detect. Is that right?
Yep.
So I guess I'm the one that's giving the tease there. Sorry if I stole your thunder.
Not at all. Not at all.
No pending announcements on upcoming acquisitions, but we're always looking for great products to bring to the PDQ customers. So just know if you have any great ideas of a product that you love and use, please send us.
They really want you to buy PDQ chicken. I really want that. So
yeah, I have been asked several times if I work for PDQ chicken, and I've never actually tried it. If any of you have feedback on whether it's good chicken, I'd love to know. There's not a PDQ chicken location here. Yeah.
Diversify that portfolio.
Hey, look, if we diversify into PDQ chicken, there's a problem.
It's time to go.
Yeah, it might. Yeah. There could be a problem. Unless it's really good chicken. I've never had it.
Yeah, hopefully they're doing the PDQ name justice.
Well, theirs is not pretty damn quick.
We're going to
Theirs
get a
is
cease and desist.
people dedicated to quality. And just to be clear, we also are people dedicated to quality. We just prefer pretty damn quick.
All right, our next question. What is the best way to approach the executive team to find out what could be done better on our end? Mike P.
Should I take that one, or what do you think?
well, you're the executive, so yeah,
that's
do it,
toward
man.
me. Again, stage and size of company matter. If you're at like a 5,000 person company, this might be more difficult. If you're at a smaller to mid-sized business, I don't think there's ever anything wrong about reaching out to an exec. Maybe it's the exec that your boss or your boss's boss's boss reports to, and just say, hey, is there ever a chance where I could get 15 minutes of your time or grab lunch or just grab a coffee real quick? And I'd love to pick your brain on a few things. There's nothing that I think as executives, you really want to feel connected to the team. And sometimes you're deliberate about that as an exec, and sometimes you just get so busy that you don't have time for it. So when people are proactive about it, it's very meaningful, at least to me, and it gives me a chance to connect with somebody, to understand what's going on, to kind of maybe skip through what the people that report to me are saying and get to the truth. And so I would be bold. And if you get shut down, maybe it just isn't meant to be. It might also be a yellow flag that like this company doesn't want to be collaborative as you think they should. But I would just highly recommend you just try to build a relationship. And if you start there, I think that's great. And I will say, like Josh gets notes from me all the time where it's like, hey, do you have a minute today? I need to pick your brain on something. And it turns into 45 minutes wasted of his life, but it's really helpful for me. So it goes both ways. And hopefully that helps.
Yeah. The other thing I'd add to that is find a mentor.
Yeah, find a mentor.
Find a mentor. That has been so helpful to find someone else. Like if you can't get that directly in your company, that's fine. That's okay.
Yeah.
There's someone out there that's been in your position before that can help you.
Yep.
All right, going on to the next one. How can we more effectively communicate budget needs if we feel like we aren't getting enough funding to run our departments effectively?
Rachel. Wow.
Rachel, back at it again.
Rachel.
Sounds like Rachel wants a.
No, it actually is probably a good question.
It is.
Like if you feel starved for funding, there's probably something that's happening first of all, you need to know when the budget process is happening. You need to be aware of it as an IT team so that you can start presenting the big ideas prior to the budget being constructed. And by the way, most businesses that operate on a calendar year, they're starting that in August. So you have to be thinking a year ahead almost on what types of big initiatives in the budget required will be needed so that you can start having those conversations as a part of the budgeting process. If you come mid-year and say, I need this thing this year, and it wasn't a part of the budget, good luck to you.
Yeah.
And just count on that being a year or two away.
Because you need to realize that like if you come mid-year and that budget's already set,
Yes.
like for that to happen this year, something else has to not happen.
100%. Yep. So I think it's, again, it goes back to understanding the business, understanding your fiscal and calendar years, understanding the budget cycle. Just be involved there.
So maybe have a mentor who isn't the CEO. Like find someone in accounting who can mentor you on the accounting process.
How does that work?
Yeah, how does
I think
it work?
specifically, like it's fun that Rachel like brought this message and she said in the chat, it's like isn't targeted, but it's a great question.
Yeah, it is a great
Rachel and I
question.
talk about security and the things that she wants budget for in Q3 is when we start talking about it. And you'll see on her whiteboard, if you went on her whiteboard at some point in time, there was like, all right, we want to do this in Q1, Q2, Q3. And if something has to slip, then what is that thing? And we're talking about it of the things that we can slip, right?
Yeah.
Love it.
And you can inject yourself into that conversation with your manager.
Love it.
Okay. All right. What is the best way to handle training on new tech and explaining it to the execs that we need it? Example, getting funding to get the IT team trained on PowerShell during slower periods.
You're going to train the IT team on PowerShell. Micah, I love you.
That's a great question because it's another XY problem, in my opinion.
Okay.
Right? Like, and not speaking the same language. If I go to Dan and I say, hey, Dan, I want this tool, or I go to Brandon and say, hey, I want this tool and it does this tech thing and it does all of these features, it's probably going to be blah, blah, blah. I don't care. Try and explain it from the problem you're trying to solve and how that relates to the business.
Yeah. I 100%.
Micah is the cutest. I think Micah, maybe pick a project they're very interested in. It might not be PowerShell, but I love you so much right now. Do you want to learn PowerShell?
Yeah.
You do?
I mean, maybe.
Okay. Okay, I love it.
I think Mike is not saying like go teach execs. He's like he wants
How do they
funding
continuing
for
education for their
for
own
the IT team.
Okay, sorry, I was too busy laughing. Okay.
And I think it's explaining what the business value is here, not just the technical know-how that we could do this, and this.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool because you have all of the context as the IT professional to understand what that means big picture.
Yeah.
Take a step back and go big picture. What does this mean for the business? And then if there's follow-on questions, get into the nitty-gritty details.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, and maybe just one
missed it.
one tip to the budget process there. If you can make a case for continuing education and training for your team as a way to say, hey, we can avoid other future costs by not having to hire somebody who has that expertise and we can add it to our team as a capability, that's a way to suggest a trade-off between hiring someone incremental and or just up-leveling your own team.
And potentially reduce staffing needs.
Yeah.
Do you like that?
Yeah, that's the old what is that, the old adage of why you want to cut costs? Or
Yeah, but that's such a, I don't know. For me, that's always been like a shaky one to try and stand on because it's.
They're not falling for it, Fortress. They're not falling for those buzzwords. They don't like those.
I mean, hey, there's some buzzwords there that probably are used quite a bit. So.
Yeah.
All right, couple more. Why aren't managers more transparent with budget and goals for that budget for the year so techs have a better idea where the focus is?
Yeah.
Yusa Sedina.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll just make a quick stab at this one. Every company has a different policy on how transparent their budgets are, and there's different rationale for that. You might work at a business where they don't want everybody to know every single dime of where it's going, and there might be good rationale, and you should ask if you have the ability to do so. So I would just ask your manager or others, like, hey, why can't we understand better the budget? And if there's a good answer that suffices, then you can just trust the team and the managers you work for. If you don't like the answer, then I don't know. It might be a signal in some way, shape, or form that there's not the transparency that you desire as a business.
Yeah, and I think you can achieve the same outcome even if you don't have, from a very analytical person, it's hard for me to rationalize if I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Yeah.
But you can still impact that budget. You can still help make those decisions, even if someone won't give you the Excel file where it actually lives.
Yeah.
Like you can still have those conversations and still have meaningful impact.
Yeah.
All right, I think we've got our last question on deck. How can you deal with an exec who keeps saying they want a budget but then ignores it when given? CM Punk?
I think if there's a budget that you have provided and then it's not the budget that gets approved, and therefore there's another one and yours has been ignored, there's some step in the process that you aren't being involved in, and I'd want to understand why. I'd want to say, hey, I noticed the budget we presented is not the budget that we've been kind of given back. Can you help me understand why this changed? And you might get a really good answer. Hey, look, we have to, we have this new initiative and on the software team, and we're reallocating resources there and over-investing. We recognize this might not allow you to achieve your objectives this year. Like that would be the kind of rationale discussion you'd want to have. If you're not getting that kind of discussion, again, it goes back to trust. Maybe there's a trust issue, and you might want to have a conversation about that. Like, is there something that we're doing that's not helping you be effective in this budget process? Is the budget we're providing not effective? And you might get interesting feedback on that.
Yeah, and it might just be an assumption on both ends. Hey, you're assuming that this IT manager knows how to structure a budget that's meaningful to someone that has a finance or accounting background.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And so there's an assumption being made and I give you this and then I'm like, oh, well, I think I did the thing.
Yeah.
And so it probably is a trust and a conversation thing at the root of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Ask for that criticism, invite that conflict, but be ready to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so scary, Dan. You guys can do it though. They can do it. All right, Dan, thank you so much. I love this conversation.
Hey, hopefully it was helpful. It was fun being here.
Yeah. Okay. If you guys ask questions, you're going to email Kelly at webcast@pdq.com.
Yeah, we've got a list here of people that I believe have earned some swag.
Yeah, we'll actually just post the list in the chat right after the outro, so just be watching that for the winners.
All righty.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much
Thanks,
for
everybody.
PDQ. I'm Tara.
I'm Dan.
And Josh.
All right. Thanks, everybody, so much for joining the webcast this week. And thanks to Dan, our very own CEO, who came down and joined us. We really appreciate him. Hey, and if you did win swag today, we're about to post the winners in chat, so stay tuned for that in just a second. And if you are on that list, just send your info to webcast@pdq.com. Don't forget to sub to the YouTube. We really appreciate that. And join the Discord. A lot going on there. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.